Hello and welcome to CIO News. I'm Akash Mistry, your host for the broadcast at CIO News. This is a recorded session and will be available on our website cionews.co.in. I'm very excited to introduce my guest for today, Anju Antony, who is the head of regional IT for India at ThoughtWorks. She is graduated with a master's in programming and certification from Harvard Business School in strategic execution. She is also a polyskill in product and technology professional having 18 plus years of experience in the IT industry as well as IT operations, product management, business analytics, pre-sales and software delivery. We also have Triveni Rabindraraj, India sales head for Goto. Triveni has 21 plus years of experience across business development, strategy, alliances, and people management. She has worked with a lot of brands like Wipro, City, and many more. Thank you so much for joining, guys. It's great to have you. So my
Thank
first
you.
question for before we start the session, of course, I would love to know for our viewers, what does your typical day looks like at work?
Is that question for me or Triveni? So for me, I think it's a lot of meetings. There are, we do work with the business on what our strategy should look like for IT, all the ongoing initiatives and giving updates, governance calls, also trickling down information into the team, uh, and what's happening there, unblocking our teams, and also setting the right goals for our teams on being able to deliver IT so that the business can scale and the business itself is effective and it can change as often as it needs, and that's our vision. So that's mostly what my day looks like. It's in meetings, just um, talking to people, ensuring that we are doing the right things, we have the right kind of support, we have the right kind of future strategies in place, whether it be products or IT operations or infrastructure.
That's great, great. So let's begin the session with my first question. Given the demand for today's distributed workforce, it has become imperative to scale up and arm everyone with the right tool, of course. So, what have been the demand for your IT ecosystem on this front?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of automation and self-service that has become important, especially in a remote situation. Self-service for how you request software, how you get a license, how do you request for additional hardware, how do you return your hardware, how do you troubleshoot? I mean, self-service and automation of processes as well. Um, the other, of course, is remote access tools, how you can manage your endpoint devices. That will help you monitor uh, not just your endpoint, but your network and everything else in your infrastructure, as well as application security. So all of those are the kind of tools that have become important in our ecosystem to have.
Of course, of course. So, speaking of IT team, is your IT help desk fully empowered to provide any fast and efficient support for the current flexible way of working today or into the future, of course?
So we have always had a SaaS solution in place for IT help desk. Um, However, I think we are on the journey to becoming better. I would say the journey towards self-service and automation has definitely started. However, the key element when we start bringing in all of these automations and AI and other things is also that human element, a seamless experience across, it could be different devices, different applications, and your interaction with humans. The human interaction is not going away, and it shouldn't, but it has to be seamless. So that journey, I think, has started, but of course, it's a journey, and it's not ending. But we're, I would say, started, and we're somewhere not close to the ending, but somewhere still in the beginning of the journey towards that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we have learned a lot of things in past couple of years after pandemic, especially. So my next question is for Triveni. So, what should be your top priorities when considering a remote support solutions, Triveni?
Sure. So, a little background to this question, probably, Akash. I think obviously the pandemic has completely changed the way we work and the adoption of the IT tools, right? I think one thing that we saw that has emerged out very strongly in the pandemic and now coming out of pandemic is connections, right? Like Anju rightly pointed out, it's all about being connected with your teams, with your internal and external stakeholders, your customers, etc. So that is something which has emerged out, or what we call as essential connections, right? Now, keeping that in mind, one thing, the way remote support was looked at previously and to now has gone through a sea of change, right? Earlier, remote support was more used for probably just remoting in and the technicians trying to just solve some issues. But now that itself has changed, right? Because obviously, there are about three trends that we talk about which has changed that. The number one trend being the supply chain disruption, right? If it started off with pandemic, and it's continuing because of the geopolitical stuff that we're seeing in, and a potential recession what the economy is probably going to go through, which we are all sort of headed towards, and that's definitely going to continue, which is going to put in a lot of lot of if I may say stress on the disruption, especially the supply chain. A lot of times, I mean, the infamous chip shortage, etc., which led to shortage of hardware, right? So so making do with what our hardware you have currently is become a critical thing, right? Which means your number of IT tickets are going to definitely increase, because you have to use the same hardware that you have. I mean, if the same devices that you have, which means that people, especially your employees, will need to have a lot of or not need to, may have a lot of issues with their hardware. So are your technicians sort of geared up for that kind of ticket volume? The second thing is, Anju, you may definitely have seen it, and we've seen that in the industry, is the great resignation, right? In 2021, the resignation was at its peak, specifically in the IT support area, right? It was told that before the pandemic, the attrition rate in this particular domain, especially with the technicians, was about 42%, which itself is high, but that was the industry norm, which has shot up to 80% last year, right? So, which means again, with I mean, every 9 months, you will probably have a new set of technicians, which means you need to have a tool which helps in that little bit of automation, and then which sort of reduces that human dependency on the human element. The third one, that which is disrupting the remote support world, is that the employees, right? Now, when I talk about the employees, although we are now coming out of the pandemic, almost hoping nothing else hits us, one thing that the employees have learned is the flexibility, is the newfound flexibility that they have in the high, and now employees want that flexibility to continue. In fact, it's I think in the Gartner research or something, it was said that 7 out of 10 employees will refuse a job offer if you do not offer that hybrid working culture, right? So, which means your virtual connections, your virtual support is not going to go. It is here to stay. You may have your employees coming into office 2 days in a week, 3 days in a week only. You may not have your office full for 5 days, which means that you don't no more have that luxury of calling your IT support guy, who probably is sitting in the same building, third floor, fourth floor, to come down and help you with the issue, right? You still need tools that will support, or that will enable you to sort of support this virtually, right? So, which means that when we are looking at a remote support, there are a lot more functionalities that we need to look at. Like, the first and the foremost is supporting multi devices. It's no more desktops. Can the remote support tool support the mobile devices, or the or any kind of a handheld device, because this is what BYOD has become so prominent now, that the support for required for that is very important. And the tool needs to help the technicians for a quick diagnostics, because remember, the technicians are also not savvy on supporting the multi-device kind of an environment. Added to this, if we're talking about a virtual world, security is a big thing, which is now no more a headache or an issue for the CISO department, but it's really become a business issue, right? Because we are looking at threats, etc., happening all over the place. So that is where we need to probably change the way we look at IT support. Sorry, I took a little bit of a long answer for that.
Now, you also covered the security part, like security being one of the top priority nowadays for each and every organization. Devin, I would love to ask you, like, what are the standards by which an IT support tool should be there?
Oh, yeah, I think you're on
Sorry.
mute.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry, I did the classic one of talking on mute. So I said I'll keep my answer very short. A couple of things, right? The remote support tool should be, end-to-end encrypted. What we recommend is that it should be AES 250-bit encrypted. It should also support, single sign-on. It should also have compatibility with multi-factor authentication. One of the main
right.
things that, especially with IT support tool, is where there is a possible window for the malicious actors to get in, is when is during the connection method. So what are some of those connection methods which can be secure, right? A lot of companies use a third party website to get into a remote support tool, right? So can you have something which is customized to your tool, which can be hosted on your intranet? So those kind of things becomes extremely critical for security.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for input, Triveni. So this brings to my next question that I have for Anju. Having a tool with the right priorities met is like the first half of the challenge that is completed, but the other half brings to driving enough adoption to meet any ROI standard. So, what are your driving forces when it comes to achieving the optimal ROI?
I think what we'd be looking at is the customer experience, or the employee experience. If you are
Mhm.
able to give great employee experience, your adoption will anyway go up. And what that also means is your they have more time to create more innovative ideas, drive future business. So some of the things that I would look at, the topmost being, what is the employee experience with something that we're rolling out? Secondly, are we achieving the speed that is required, in troubleshooting or supporting people? The convenience, and also very important is the knowledge base, right? Like Triveni was pointing out, there is churn in the industry. When you reach out to your support, you want somebody at the other end to be knowledgeable and not have to repeat, A, B, C steps again. But someone who's, one is having that history of what was your previous interaction, or also someone who's knowledgeable on what these issues could be, right? So those would be what I would measure, and help in terms of driving ROI. And those would be the measures that I would look at to see if we're getting enough ROI from that.
So, speaking of ROI, I would love to highlight, I would love to ask Triveni, of course, like, what are the biggest challenges before and after adopting a remote support solution, and how do you suggest overcoming those challenges?
Yeah. So I think the what is it before? I think Anju has very well articulated that. Just sort of reiterating that is, how well can you sort of automate the reoccurring issues, right? Because if you actually boil down it and see, it's just the top five issues which are very repetitive, right? Which you probably get those repetitive tickets. So can we create a knowledge base on how to, and educate the employee on doing the first level troubleshooting themselves, right? And specifically in IT environments, that is possible. In a non-IT environment, it's a little too much to ask from the employees, right? But in an IT industry, it's definitely doable. So the second thing is, obviously because of the attrition, etc., we need to also equip the technicians with some UIs, etc., which are very easy to use and easy to adopt. So I think a vendors like us need to have that robust onboarding and training and hand-holding to be done even before the deployment starts off, so that the adoption is higher, right? Well, because one of
Right.
the key things is the adoption of the tool, and this is true to any SaaS tool, be it a CRM tool or anything. Adoption is the biggest problem. So the one thing is to understand, how can we get through to that. At least the first 1 month needs to be spent time in helping the technicians to adopt. The second thing is more towards ROI, right? In terms of saying, and this is to be done pre-implementation, is what are some of the ROI factors that we are going to be measured on. We need to understand that from our customers, so that we have those two or three ROI factors, and then we measure on it. And then the third factor, and which is very very critical, is having a customer success manager attached to the customer, because they will be able to help in terms of best practices, able to showcase the utilization, and again training reiterations, etc., and also looking at how are we scoring on the ROI from time to time.
Perfect. Perfect. That was the last question from my side. I would really like to thank you, Anju and Triveni, for your time and your input knowledge. Anything else that you would like to add from your side? Feel free.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd probably like to conclude saying that, hybrid work is here to stay. And IT is definitely now one of the main uh, departments in any company, because of the essential connections, and the essential connections are not possible if you don't have IT and if you don't have the right IT tools. So I think now it's really time. I mean, we've really got the time now to take the center stage, because the whole business depends on us.
Great. Absolutely. I do agree with that, Triveni. So thank you. That is all from our side. Thank you, Anju, again for joining the session. Thank you, Triveni, for conducting the session from our side.
Thank you
Thank you.
also for
Thank you.
having us.
Thank you so much.